Hello everyone, Annette Ornell is here with episode 2 of Quilt Snacks. I'll wait just one little second, see if I'm connected. Hi Kathy, nice to see you. We're already in episode 2, can you believe it? I've prepared some stuff for you guys, some more tips and tricks about binding, and I hope you are watching. Hey Rhonda, Glenda. So there's quite a few people on already, so let me get started. Thank you. So what I'm doing today is, if you've watched one of my previous little videos, I had talked about some binding a little while ago and how I cut my binding. I've had lots of questions about that. People liked seeing the video, and so I thought I would share how I'm going to do it from start to finish. So my plan is to cut some binding, to actually sew some binding, and to fold some binding and show you how I do all that. The only thing we're not doing today is we're not going to sew it onto a quilt. I'm going to save that for another quilt snack because it probably would take too long, and I'm trying to keep these little snacks short because they're sort of like appetizers. So let me turn this around and show you how I cut my binding again. I'm going to turn it around. Okay. So taking my setup here with me. Whoa. Cancel. Okay. I think that we can see that. So I just prepared a little piece here just to show kind of how I do my binding. It's a scrap. It's too small a piece to do much with, but it works for what we're doing here. So the first thing I like to do is cut off the selvage. I cut off the selvage because we would have to leave that out when we sew our strips together anyway. So this is much better to just kind of cut off the selvage. I'm turning off my little fan here. So what I like to do is I take one corner, and this is a rectangle now. You can imagine it much bigger. This could be with the fabric, how it comes from the bolt. But I take one corner and I fold it, and then you have this triangle. And when I cut my batting, if it's a bigger piece, usually I have a smaller ruler, and it's really not large enough to cut the batting strips the binding strips effectively. I'm still on batting from last time, my goodness. But anyway, so let me start over. So here is your piece of fabric. We're cutting bias binding. I take one corner and I fold it up, and then I fold that corner down some more, and actually I fold it twice, and then I move my binding over here, and then I cut off this little piece, and then I cut every 2 inches, which means I do 2-inch binding. I just use the lines on the mat, which this is the only time I really use the lines on the mat. Every other time when I have to have accurate pieces, I rely on the measurements of my ruler more so than the mat. But since I have shown you that binding, I have talked to a friend who actually has a ruler out that might make it easier for you guys to do your binding. And this is the ruler right here. I don't know if you can see it. It's the Bias Binding Simplified ruler, and it's a Creative Grids ruler. It was done by a designer friend of mine, Janice Pope, and I will put the description of where you can get a ruler if you like it in the comments later after the video is over. But the nice thing about it, you can see how to do all that cutting, and she has almost the same method, but she doesn't roll it up as much. So the same thing applies. You fold this up, but then you use this ruler to kind of cut your binding, which is kind of nice. And the width of the ruler, is anywhere between, you can do 2 inches, 2 1/4, and you can do 2 1/2. And she also has little strips on there, how much you actually need to have in order for your binding to fit your quilt. So you measure the circumference of your quilt, and however many inches this is, you cut X amount of bias strips from that fabric. So I thought I would just kind of show you that there's some other methods out there. I kind of do the easy way that I showed you before, with just folding it, turning it, and then using the ruler this way. But it's really neat to have a ruler that has the steps already printed on there, so you can't forget how to do that. So now that I've shown you how to do the cutting, I'm going to go to my purple strips that I did before. Let me turn you around here. So I'm going to go to my purple strips that we did before, and I'm going to show you how I sort and put those together. I've actually changed my room around. I don't know if you can see it, so I can do these videos a little bit easier. So let's see. Okay, let me get back up a little bit more because I do something with my strips before I sew. Okay, so these are the purple strips of binding that I cut the last time we were on the video, on the binding video. And here's one that I made that I'm going to use. But here are the strips, and they're all in those little packages. And until I use them, that's what I do. I just pile up one pack on top of the other and keep them that way so they don't get all wrinkled up. But before I sew them, I actually sort them. So this batting strip is what I call, has parallel ends. So I call it sort of a parallelogram strip, a parallel strip. So I sort all the parallel strips together first because those are going to be sewn together first, because there's other strips that look like little roofs. You see it? They have like an angle on either side, and I put those separate. The reason I put those separate is because they tend to complicate things when you turn how you sew them together. You have to turn each time. So I sew all the parallel ones together, and then I go to my roof ones. And the ones that are really small like this, I don't use them. I sort them out. They're scraps. Even this is too small, because every time you have a seam, you know, that's more likely to fall on a corner when you actually sew them on. So I just wanted to show you how I sort them out. So I sew all of these together, and then I move on to that, and I'll show you how I'll do that, because there's a little trick to that. So let me go up higher. Can you see this strip? I'm going to just fold it in a little bit. This is the strip that's with the parallel ends. And these strips right here, they sort of look like roofs. Okay? All right, good. Now let me snap this back in. Okay, let's see. Okay, so let me zoom in on the, I can't zoom in on nothing here. Yep, it worked. Okay, so I want to see if I can zoom in where I'm going to sew right here. Okay, if I don't trip over this thing here. Okay, so, and I usually like to match my thread color. So here I have the first purple strip, and I'm going to take the other one and line it up. Let me see if I can see that. Yes. Okay, so this is how that's supposed to go together. And I know in quilting we've all been taught to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and for the most part that applies. But what I do is I flip one side over the other, right sides together, and this fabric happens to have a right and wrong side. And then I am, you pull this, I am sewing from where this gap opens and this gap opens. I sew from here to there. It doesn't really matter how big your seam allowance is, as long as you sew from where the meeting point is on the bottom to where the meeting point of the strip is on the top. Because if I hold that, you want the strip to be a continuous strip without breaks. So let me do one, and I just flip this over to the other side. Okay. So sometimes things are not even. I really don't pay that much attention to it. I just go to where it meets, and that's how you get the accurate measure. And then I take that strip, and this is important to know for when you're doing bias binding with batiks that have probably a right and wrong side that is really hard to tell apart, or no right and wrong side. I flip it once, one time. Whatever strip comes out, I flip it once. I hope that shows. And then I'm going to take my other parallel strip, parallel binding strip, and I line it up, and I don't care what happens over here. I just move it, and then I go to the other side. So now this is where I'm going to sew. I want to end up here, You really don't need to do exactly a 1/4 inch. You just aim. It's kind of like driving a car. You aim in the distance. So here we go. Okay, so I flip this strip one time, and then comes the next one. So I am already into my roof strips. So this is the same as before, the same angle. And then when I turn it one time, the angle changes. So now, if I take my strip, that doesn't fit. And what I have to do is I just have to flip it over to the other side, and then that angle fits again. That's why the roof strips in my quilts always come at the very end, because I know it's going to flip back and forth, and there's nothing more irritating as having a parallel strip that doesn't fit a roof strip, and then you have to recut things. So, okay, so this is where it opens. Whoops, bubble. Okay, there we go. So as soon as I have a couple of stitches done, then I can aim, then I can move this. And on my machine, it even has a line here where the center is. So I'm going to line it up for that, and I'm going to let the machine do most of the work. And even though this is smaller, I'm going to use it because I want to show you one more time how to do that. So this goes back to that same first angle on the parallel strips. And so I'm going to finish up here. Then you have something weird that is all connected. You probably have done that before. Kind of little batting skirt here. And I just clip these little doohickeys. So once they're clipped, now you have an option. You can either clip your dog ears before or after you do your binding. Sometimes, you know, if you're sitting there already, it's just easiest just to clip them. Okay. Especially when you start putting it together on your quilt, you have to cut them off anyway, so you might as well get that done. Okay. I have, I think, one more, two more. Last one, and then we're going to go to the ironing board. This is that wonky one, but see, it still works. So, and if something gets really odd and out of shape, guess what? Nobody's going to check it. I'm just going to trim it down a little bit so my seam allowance is not too big inside my binding, okay? All right. So let me turn my phone around. Hopefully I won't drop it this time. Those legs are kind of, you know, here we go. Make them a little slimmer. Oh, I'm going to try from the other side so you guys can see what's going on. All right. Okay. So now I have this binding, and the first thing I like to do is I like to open my seams. Can you see it? I think so. Okay, good. So I like to open my seams, and I go down the line, and a lot of times it's easier you do that first, then you don't have to worry about it anymore. And since we've clipped those little dog ears, it's real easy to open. Okay, two more, I think. Whoa, this doesn't want to. Okay, so then what I do is I just fold it in half, and I just run my iron right alongside it. So sometimes when you do that, you don't want to really stretch it too hard. Sometimes when you do that, what could happen is that you burn yourself if you're not careful. So there's a new tool out now. I'm going to show you how to use that. This one is called a sasher. Can you see it? Where am I? This is called a sasher, and I got that at Loving Stitches Quilt Shop, and I'm sure other quilt shops carry it, and you might call them. And, you know, it's actually an Australian designer, I believe, who invented this. And so what you do is you feed this through like a belt buckle. And so it's exactly the size that it needs to be. Whatever you're binding with, you need to get the size that is exactly half. So my binding is 2 inches. So that little sasher is a 1 inch. They have all different kind of sizes, of course. And then what I also use, I use these little blocking fork. They're called fork pins. But you could use 2 pins also. And then what you do, let me see if that's, oh, that is out of range. Let me adjust this. Okay. Here we go. So then what you do, you kind of put your iron there, and you've got to give it a little bit of a tug so you know it lays straight, but you can just run your iron right along that binding. Isn't that nice? So you don't burn your fingers. And then what I do is I just reposition that fork pin, give myself room for the iron, the width of the iron, and then I fold this again, and I just kind of run it right along here. And that's where it's important that you have your ears off, because if your ears are not cut off exactly, then sometimes it gets derailed. Like my ears were off a little bit. So you should probably take the time to snip them off flush with the edge of the binding. So what do you think? It's pretty neat, huh? Let me turn that around. There. Okay. So that was my little binding tutorial, and in a couple times, maybe in 2 weeks, I'm going to show you how to sew the binding to a quilt. I have to make a little demo sandwich sample, and I want to show you how I turn the corners, and I want to show you how I join the binding, because I think I do it in a quite easy way. It's not too complicated, and I feel like once you see it, it makes more sense rather than talking about it. So I think it'd be a nice little quilt snack to share in a couple of weeks. So next week, just as an ahead, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my little animal blocks and do some step outs and show you how those fit together, so you can see. So you can see how some of those blocks go together, and give you some tips on how to do the different things with it. So, okay. All right. Well, I hope you had fun. The ruler is a friend designed this ruler, and let me show you again what it looks like. It looks like this, and she actually has it on her website. So I'm going to put a link on her website in case you want the ruler. It's called the Bias Binding Simplified, but it's actually made by Creative Grid. So, you know, some quilt shops will carry that ruler already, but I'm just going to put the link to her website. Since she's the designer, she has more information about it on her website as well. So thank you, Lisa. But yeah, so next time I'm going to show you how to put a block together. I haven't quite decided yet. It might be a turtle. It might be something else. Maybe you guys can give me some hints in the comments what you would like to see. And the little bias tool from Loving Stitches that I bought at Loving Stitches, it's called a sasher, like this. It's called a sasher. It has that neon yellow, but they also have some other color ones when they have it in a combo pack. But I am just going to use this one because I know I'll never make binding. Oh, I don't say never, but I usually don't make binding that's more than 2 inches wide. So I will put the link on there, and I will put the link for Loving Stitches for the little sasher as well. Okay? So I will see you in a couple of weeks, and I hope you stay safe and well, and you do some sewing and quilting and get to relax a little bit. And I'll wait to hear what some people are putting down, what they would like to know. So if you know you have a question for me, please put it right there on Facebook, or you can private message me or anything. The bear? Yeah, sure. I'll show you how to do the bear. So that would be a good one. So I'll go through some of the things that people have questions, and I'll make a little sample for you guys to show you. Okay? So have a great day. Have a great week. And I'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you all so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. Bye. Yes, have a wonderful Mother's Day, all of you. Thank you. Bye.